So, the bed sheets are still white, perfectly white. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, stands in the doorway, her arms crossed over her silk robe, her eyes scanning the pristine cotton sheets where my husband and I just spent our first night as a married couple. Was last night. Not to your satisfaction, dear. Did you hear that? Have you ever heard a question that wasn't a question at all, but a judgment, a verdict delivered before the trial has even begun? That was my welcome to this family. That was my first morning as a wife. I am 32 years old, back in my small hometown in Ohio. That's an age they whisper about, an age where you're not just single, you're a leftover, a story with a sad ending. All my friends from high school are married, with mortgages and minivans and 2, sometimes 3 kids who call me Aunt Sophie. Their lives are settled like dust on old furniture. And me, my story was just getting a bizarre, terrifying new chapter. It's not because I'm ugly, you know. I think it was just fate. The universe's cruel, cosmic joke. After high school, college wasn't in the cards. We didn't have the money, and honestly, I wasn't the academic type. So, like so many small-town kids with big dreams and empty pockets, I moved to the city. I became a waitress in a bustling downtown restaurant. It was the thing to do. For 3 years, I lived in that chaotic, thrilling, lonely world. The noise, the lights, the endless river of faces. It eventually wore me down. My quiet soul couldn't take the constant roar. So, I went back home. During my time in the city, I fell in love. His name was Mark. He was 2 years older, from a different town, a different world. It was a whirlwind 6 months of stolen kisses in the rain, and dreams whispered in the dark. But then came the pressure, the expectation. He wanted more than I was ready to give. If you loved me, you'd show me, he'd say. I refused. Once, he let it go. Twice, 3 times. After the 4th time, his conclusion was swift and brutal. You don't love me. The texts became shorter, then slower, then they stopped altogether. We broke up without ever saying the words. A ghosting before I even knew what ghosting was. And God, did it hurt? I was that pathetic girl, crying, begging, pleading with a dial tone. But you can't force a heart to stay where it doesn't want to be. Eventually, I let go. A few years later, when I was 24, I tried again. This time with a man named Kevin, a local guy who worked for the town council. We were together for nearly 3 years. It was comfortable, safe. Then, one day, he was offered a new position in a different city. And just like that, he looked at me and said the words that are somehow both honest and the most profound lie. I'm just not in love with you anymore. This time, I didn't beg. I was older, stronger. I simply nodded and thanked him for his honesty. What's the point in holding on to someone who has already let you go? But then, 2 months later, I heard through the grapevine that he'd married the daughter of a bank president in his new city. And I just had to laugh. A bitter, hollow laugh. My love life was a goddamn tragicomedy. After that, I closed up shop. I decided that being alone was better. It was simpler. It meant I could dedicate my life to the one person who had never, ever let me down. My mother, my 60-year-old warrior of a mother, her life. God, her life makes mine look like a fairy tale. The oldest of 5, growing up dirt poor. My grandfather went off to war and never came back, leaving my grandmother to raise 5 kids on her own, with nothing but calloused hands and a will of iron. My mother became a second mother to her siblings, sacrificing her own childhood to raise them. You'd think that would earn her a lifetime of gratitude, wouldn't you? But no. Just last month, my youngest uncle, the one she practically raised from a baby, screamed at her. his face purple with rage, over a piece of land my grandmother left behind. He threatened her with a knife. He wanted the small plot of land our old house sits on, right next to the new highway exit. It's valuable, prime real estate. My mom didn't care about the money. She never has. What broke her heart was the betrayal, the venom from the little brother she'd protected her whole life. She would have given it to him, but I knew how much it gutted her, and the reason my mother never married, the reason I exist. She was deeply in love once, with a man from the next town over. They made promises, planned a future, and then he betrayed her, marrying another woman. In those days, in our small town, my arrival was a scandal, a stain. The whispers followed her everywhere, but she held her head high, weathered every storm, and raised me on her own. She is the strongest person I have ever known, which is why, when I came home from my shift at the local diner that evening, my heart sank when I saw her waiting for me on the porch swing. She had that look in her eye. "Well, look at you," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "An official welcoming committee for your working girl daughter." I held up a bag of oranges. "Got these from the farmer's market. Everyone at work says they're the sweetest this year." "That's nice, honey." Her voice was quiet. "Sophie, I have something important to talk to you about." I sat down next to her, the worn wood of the swing creaking beneath us as the sky bled from orange to purple. "This afternoon," she began, not looking at me, "Mrs. Gable stopped by. You remember her? From down the road? She moved to the city years ago." I nodded slowly, a knot forming in my stomach. She was talking about a young man, a potential match for you. He lives in the city. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with everything we weren't saying. "He's 35, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "His name is Daniel. He lives with his mother. He has a younger sister, but she's married." I stared out at the fireflies beginning to flicker in the yard. "Mom, I just want to stay here, with you. In a few years, maybe I'll, adopt a child, someone to keep us from being lonely when we're old." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes flashing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "No, absolutely not. I will not have you repeat my life. Do you understand me?" Her voice cracked, and the tears I'd been dreading began to well in her eyes. "Sophie, look at me. Look at my life. A woman without a husband. It's a hard life. It's a lonely, painful life." Her gaze drifted off, lost in a sea of painful memories. "I remember the nights you were sick with a fever, and I was so terrified I didn't dare close my eyes. I remember the kids at school teasing you, calling you names because you didn't have a father. I remember you asking me, with your big, innocent eyes, 'Mommy, where's my daddy? Why does everyone else have a daddy and I don't?'" She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "My beautiful girl, you deserve to be happy. You deserve a partner. I know you've been hurt, but please, don't let that close you off from the joy of being a wife, of having a family." She let out a shaky breath. "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. When you were 3, I almost got married, but he didn't want me to bring you with me, and I refused. I thought I needed a husband, a partner to lean on. But look at us. We survived. We've been here, together, all these years." Her eyes met mine, pleading. "I'm not afraid of what the neighbors will say. I'm not afraid of them whispering that the women in this family are cursed to have children without husbands. I've lived through that. I'm afraid for you. I've walked this path, so I want to give you the best advice I can. Please, just meet him." What could I say to that? My mother, who had learned nothing from books but everything from life, was speaking a truth so profound it silenced me. She had lived a life of sacrifice and pain, all for me, and now all she wanted was for my life to be different, easier. "If I get married," I whispered, "who will take care of you?" She smiled, a sad, beautiful smile. "Don't you worry about me. Your aunts still love me. Besides, the city is only an hour away. You can come visit whenever you want." 2 months later, I walked down the aisle. I never thought I would marry a man I didn't love, a man who was practically a stranger. But sometimes, life isn't about what you choose. It's about the choices that are made for you. My first impression of Daniel, my husband, was that he was handsome, in a quiet, melancholic way. He had the mature, weary beauty of a man of 35 who had seen too much. But his eyes were sad, so incredibly sad. They were like deep, still pools of water with untold stories lying at the bottom. That sadness was probably why he was a man of so few words. He answered questions, but never offered anything more. Sometimes, his answers were so simple. "So is less than #0. 3# is greater than off," that you'd think he had a developmental issue. And in a way, he did. His mother, Eleanor, had told us the story. Daniel had been a genius, graduated top of his class from MIT in computer science, worked for a major military tech contractor, and then something happened, a psychological break, severe depression. He had to quit his job, undergo treatment. Even now, though he was better, he wasn't the man he used to be. There were still moments, she'd warned, when he would just sit and stare into space, mumbling to himself, singing children's songs under his breath. Our first night together, I was exhausted. I didn't get back to our room until after 10. Daniel was already asleep on the king-sized bed, his breathing deep and even. I tiptoed to the closet, pulled out my pajamas, and slipped into the bathroom. The long, hot shower felt incredible, washing away the stress and fatigue of the day. When I came out, I quietly put away my clothes and climbed into bed. I wasn't scared of the man lying next to me. He was my husband, after all. Sleep came easily. I didn't know, in the deep dark of the night, that he had woken up. I didn't know that under the soft glow of the nightlight, he had sat up and just watched me. That after a long time, he had reached out a hand, his fingers hesitating before gently brushing a stray lock of hair from my cheek. I didn't know that he had then gotten out of bed, taken his pack of cigarettes and a lighter, and gone out onto the balcony, leaving me to my peaceful, ignorant slumber. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a sharp, insistent knocking on the bedroom door. My eyes fluttered open. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then it hit me. I was a wife. This was my new home. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to open the door. And there she was, Eleanor. Her eyes swept over me, from my messy hair down to my bare feet, a flicker of disapproval in her gaze. She clicked her tongue and brushed past me into the room. I followed her meekly, like a child who'd been caught doing something wrong. She walked straight to our bed, her eyes scrutinizing the sheets. "You just woke up?" she asked, her voice flat. "Yes. Yes, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed. "How was your wedding night?" "The sheets are still white, perfectly white. There's no mark." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My blood ran cold. We were both very tired last night," I stammered. "We just went straight to sleep." She turned to face me, her gaze as sharp as a shard of glass, searching my face for a lie. "Go downstairs and prepare breakfast." "Yes, ma'am." As she walked out, she sighed dramatically, just loud enough for me to hear. If it weren't for the need for a grandson to carry on the family name, I would never have accepted a country girl like her into this house. My eyes widened in shock. This was the same woman who had smiled so warmly, so kindly, in my mother's living room. The transformation was staggering. The mask had come off. At that exact moment, the bathroom door opened and Daniel walked out. He glanced at me with that same unnervingly vacant expression. "You heard her," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Go make breakfast." I pulled my hair up, splashed water on my face, and went downstairs to face my new reality. Under Eleanor's hawk-like supervision, I made breakfast. It took me 4 attempts to fry an egg to her exact specifications. Over easy, but with no runny white at all. The meal was eaten in absolute silence. It was a loud, heavy silence that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. After breakfast, Daniel wandered out to the front porch to watch the old men from the neighborhood play chess, and I was summoned to the living room for a little chat with my mother-in-law. "Sit down," she commanded. I sat on the edge of the plush sofa, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "As you know," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "for a girl of your age and background to marry into a city family like this, it's like you've won the lottery. You must remember, before Daniel's illness, the women he dated were university graduates, teachers, doctors, and even then, I wasn't entirely satisfied with them. All I could do was nod and whisper, 'Yes, ma'am.' Now," she leaned forward, her eyes pinning me in place, "Daniel is not what he once was. All my hopes for him, they've vanished. So, I have accepted you into this house for one reason, and one reason only. You are to give me a grandson, a male heir to carry on this family's name. Do you understand?" I understand. Good. Also, I am a woman who values cleanliness. This house must be spotless at all times, and we do not entertain just anyone. You will not invite your friends or family here without my express permission. Is that clear?" Just then, her phone rang. I don't know who it was, but after a brief conversation, she stood up. "I'm having lunch with friends today. You only need to cook for yourself and Daniel." "Yes, ma'am." I watched her walk out the front door, her back ramrod straight, and now I understood. The warm, kind woman from my mother's house was a performance, a role she played to get what she wanted. A wife, any wife, for her broken son, a vessel to produce an heir, a caretaker. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. It seemed I'd made a terrible bet. Eleanor had told my mother that her husband had died of cancer 3 years ago. Daniel's sister, Claire, used to work at a bank, but now she managed a chain of restaurants with her husband and ran an online cosmetics business. She had a 3-year-old daughter named Lily, and she'd been, well, not entirely honest about Daniel's condition. My mother had hesitated, of course, but when I met him, when I looked into those profoundly sad eyes, something inside me stirred. A strange, protective instinct. I felt like I couldn't abandon him. And so, here I am. It was an impulsive decision, a 32-year-old woman's last-ditch gamble on something resembling a life. But I'm here now, and I will see it through. Everyone always said I was quiet, gentle, obedient. Maybe if I'm just patient, if I just endure, everything will be okay. Just as I was finishing up in the kitchen, Daniel came back inside. "Where's my mother?" he asked. "She went out. She said she's having lunch with friends, so it'll just be the 2 of us." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Listen, since I'm your wife now, the person who's going to live with you for the rest of our lives, Could you maybe not keep such a distance from me? I had to force the words out, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. He just stared at me with those vacant eyes, then turned and walked upstairs without a word. I stood there, frozen, feeling the heat of humiliation creep up my neck. Later that afternoon, Eleanor returned with her daughter, Claire. Claire swept into the house, glanced at me with an expression of pure disdain, and walked straight to the refrigerator. She grabbed a bottle of water, chugged half of it, and then turned to leave. "Mom, I'm heading out," she called. "Oh, already? Stay for a while." "Can't. Got things to do." Claire's eyes flicked over to me again. "And Mom, the family isn't exactly poor. Can you please buy your daughter-in-law some new clothes? Looking at her is just depressing." Eleanor's gaze followed her daughter's, landing on me. She nodded. "You're right. I'll talk to her about it tomorrow." "Good. I'm leaving." I looked down at my outfit. It was a dress I'd bought just last week. It was brand new. But in their world, the world of money and status, I was an eyesore, a stain on their perfect picture. My first full day as a bride, and I was already drowning in culture shock. That night, at 8:30, Eleanor called me into her room to massage her feet. I didn't get back to my own room until after 9, my hands aching. Daniel was already sound asleep. Just an hour earlier, Eleanor had been lecturing me about the importance of getting pregnant soon, of giving her a grandchild to hold. How was that supposed to happen when my husband was always asleep before I even got into bed? I went through my nightly routine, my mind a whirl of questions. Why did I get married? What is the point of this? I suppose this is what a loveless marriage feels like, an empty space in a shared bed. The next morning, I woke up, and again, Daniel was fast asleep beside me, and right on cue, the sharp knock came at the door. Not wanting to wake him, I quickly got out of bed and opened it. It was Eleanor, of course. She didn't say a word, just brushed past me and went straight to the bed, her eyes fixed on the sheets. My eyes followed hers, and then I saw it. On my side of the bed, where I had just been lying, was a small, dark, red stain. Before I could even process what I was seeing, a slow, satisfied smile spread across Eleanor's face. "If you're tired, you can sleep in a little longer," she said, her voice suddenly warm, almost kind. "You don't need to make me breakfast." "Oh, okay, just rest. I'll see you later." She left, and I just stood there, staring at the blood stain. Did I get my period? I rushed into the bathroom to check, but there was nothing. I examined my arms and legs for any cuts or scratches. Nothing. So where on earth did that blood come from? I walked out of the bathroom to find Daniel awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. I pointed at the stain. "Where did that come from? Are you bleeding somewhere?" He glanced at the stain, then back at me, his face a mask of indifference. "I don't know," he said. A week turned into a month. I started looking for a job. I needed to get out of that house. I needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with judgment and unspoken rules. I found a job waiting tables at a small diner near our house, a cozy little place called The Daily Grind. My work visa was processed as part of my spousal application, a small mercy in a sea of complications. Eleanor, of course, was not thrilled. A waitress? She'd scoffed. My daughter-in-law, but with no college degree and no other skills. My options were limited, and I think, deep down, she was relieved to have me out of her sight. It was better than having me underfoot all day, a constant reminder of her son's unfortunate circumstances. My shift was from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. It was hard work, but I loved it. It was real. As for Daniel, his routine never changed. Every morning, he'd wander down to the park at the end of the street, to watch the old men play chess. Sometimes he'd sit with the neighborhood kids on the curb, just watching them play. But I noticed something strange. In public, he was the lost, childlike man his mother described. But when we were alone in our room, a different man emerged. He would sit by the window for hours, a quiet, pensive dignity about him. He seemed older, wiser. I tried to talk to him, to ask what he was thinking about, but he would just ignore me, his gaze fixed on something far away. It was like I was a ghost in my own bedroom. Today was a particularly brutal shift at the diner. The lunchtime rush hit us like a tidal wave. I was weaving through the crowded tables, a tray balanced on one hand, when a new busboy, startled by a sudden crash of plates from the kitchen, stumbled backwards, right into me. The tray went flying. A bowl of scalding hot clam chowder arched through the air and landed squarely on my back. The pain was instantaneous, a white-hot, searing agony that stole my breath. I cried out, a sharp, involuntary yelp. My coworkers rushed over, helping me to the back, dousing the burn with cold water. Thankfully, the bowl was small, the burn not too severe, but damn did it hurt. I came home that afternoon exhausted, my back throbbing with every step. The house was filled with the sound of chatter and laughter. Eleanor was entertaining friends in the living room. I pasted on a polite smile, greeted each of them, and endured their curious, pitying stares. "You're home from work, dear?" one of them asked. "Yes, ma'am." Another one turned to Eleanor, her voice a stage whisper. "Eleanor, you're too picky. I told you about that lovely kindergarten teacher for Daniel, and you said no." "Oh, well," Eleanor sighed, casting a pointed look in my direction. Her family was just too large, too many complications. She then turned to me. "Sophie, be a dear and go clean up the kitchen. It's a bit of a mess." "Yes, ma'am." The kitchen looked like a bomb had gone off. Remnants of a fancy lunch, an empty fondue pot, cheese rinds, cracker crumbs, and empty wine glasses were everywhere. I tied my hair back, put on an apron, and got to work, scraping plates, washing dishes, wiping down counters, scrubbing the floor. By the time I was done, the kitchen was sparkling, but my body ached, and the burn on my back felt like a hot coal pressed against my skin. Ignoring the cackling laughter from the living room, I dragged my weary body upstairs. Daniel was on the balcony, gently stroking a fluffy gray cat that had clearly wandered over from a neighbor's yard. He had a soft, peaceful look on his face. I knew he loved cats, but Eleanor was allergic to them, so he couldn't have one. He seemed to be in his own little world, so I didn't disturb him. I grabbed a change of clothes and collapsed onto the bed, lying carefully on my side to avoid putting pressure on my back. That evening, Claire came over with her daughter, Lily, for dinner. Lily was a whirlwind of chaotic energy, a tiny, adorable hurricane who left a trail of destruction in her wake. She ran, she jumped, she screamed, and when she inevitably fell, she would wail like she'd been mortally wounded, turning the house into a symphony of chaos. I was in the kitchen, chopping chicken for dinner, when Lily came tearing in. Without warning, she leaped onto my back, wrapping her arms and legs around me like a little monkey. The sudden weight, the impact of her small body, sent a bolt of pure agony through my burn. It was a reflex, a pure, instinctual reaction to the pain. I dropped the knife and my hands flew back, pushing her off me. I used as little force as I could, but in the next instant, she was on the floor, letting out a piercing shriek. Claire came running in from the living room, her face a mask of panic. "Lily, sweetheart, what happened?" She scooped her daughter up, rocking her back and forth. "Shh, Mommy's here. It's okay." Lily, her face red and tear-streaked, pointed a chubby finger at me. Auntie Sophie pushed me. She pushed me down. My head snapped up. No, that's not what happened, Claire's eyes blazed with fury. Are you calling my daughter a liar? She snarled. I saw you. I saw you push her. What the hell is wrong with you? No. You don't understand. My back is... I never got to finish. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. What is going on in here? Lily, my sweet girl, why are you crying? Claire's voice was laced with venom. It's your precious daughter-in-law. I guess she doesn't like us visiting, so she decided to shove my daughter to the floor. Sophie, is this true? Did you push Lily? No. I mean, yes, but it wasn't on purpose. My back is injured, and she jumped on me, and I just reacted. It was useless. Claire cut me off, turning to her mother. You know what? We're leaving. I can't even look at her without losing my appetite. Don't be like that, honey, Eleanor pleaded. Then she rounded on me, her eyes cold as ice. Well, are you just going to stand there? Apologize to the child. But now, when you've done something wrong, you apologize. Did your mother not teach you that? The words hit me like a slap in the face. I felt something inside me break. My own mother, who had taught me nothing but kindness and resilience. Humiliation burned in my cheeks, hotter than the injury on my back. But I did it, for the sake of a peace that didn't even exist. I walked over to the sobbing child and her glaring mother. Lily, I'm sorry. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of silence. I didn't say another word. I served dinner, cleared the table, and went up to my room. A few minutes later, Daniel came in. What's wrong with your back? He asked quietly. I flinched. I didn't even know he was there. How? How did you know I said my back was hurt? I was on the stairs, he said, his voice flat. You were all shouting. I heard everything. So you were there, I thought. A fresh wave of bitterness washing over me. You heard them accuse me. You heard them humiliate me. And you did nothing. So you just stood by and watched your wife get bullied. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them, dripping with a sarcasm I didn't know I possessed. He looked at me, and for the first time, his eyes seemed to focus, to really see me. They were deep and dark, and for a terrifying second, I felt like I was falling into them. Why did you agree to marry me? He asked, his voice low. The question caught me off guard. I answered honestly, because you seemed so lonely. I wanted to do something. I didn't want to leave you like that. I trailed off, feeling foolish. It doesn't make sense, I know. A strange, twisted smile played on his lips. I see. So it turns out you're the crazy one, not me. He walked closer, stopping right in front of me. Tell me, what's wrong with your back? It's a burn. From hot soup at the diner. He nodded slowly. He looked like he was about to say something else. Something important. That blood, I blurted out, seizing the opportunity. The blood on the sheets that first week. Was that you? He paused, the moment stretching into an eternity. Then, the mask slipped back on. The focus in his eyes dissolved, replaced by that familiar, frustrating vacancy. I don't know, he said. The medicine for your back is in the cabinet. Go to sleep. He turned away, and I knew the conversation was over. But in that moment, I knew. I knew with absolute certainty. My husband wasn't crazy. He wasn't broken. He was hiding. He was living inside a fortress of his own making, a performance so convincing it had fooled everyone. And I, his stranger of a wife, had just seen the real man peering through the cracks. And I made a promise to myself, right then and there. I would wait. I would be patient. I would stand outside the walls of his fortress for as long as it took, waiting for him to be ready to come out. Have you ever loved someone who was a prisoner in their own life? How long would you be willing to wait for them? 3 months passed. 3 months of living in that beautiful, silent, suffocating house. I settled into a routine. Work at the diner, cook, clean, endure Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments, and share a room with a husband who was a ghost. But something had shifted between us since that night. The air was still thick with unspoken things, but now there was a current running through it, a fragile, tentative connection. We were two strangers bound by a contract, but now we were also two people who shared a secret. We both knew he wasn't crazy. This weekend was the 3rd anniversary of my grandmother's death. Back home, it was a quiet but important tradition, a time for family to gather, to remember, to be together. I went to Eleanor, my request rehearsed, my heart pounding. My family is having a small memorial for my grandmother this weekend, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was hoping I could go home for a few days. She considered it, her lips pursed. To my surprise, she agreed. Fine, you may go. Then I pushed my luck. I was also hoping that Daniel could come with me. Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing with immediate refusal. Absolutely not. I opened my mouth to argue, but thought better of it. I simply nodded and went to work. But the next day, she sought me out. I've reconsidered, she said, her tone clipped. Daniel will accompany you. I was stunned. I didn't know what had changed her mind, what he might have said to her, but I wasn't going to question it. At the diner, my coworker, a bright, bubbly 20-year-old named Mia, was practically bouncing with excitement for me. You're going home for 3 whole days? She chirped. I'm so jealous. It's gonna be so boring here without you. Oh, I'm sure you'll survive, I laughed. You can talk to the others. Yeah, but they're not you, she pouted. Mia was my one bright spot in this new city life. She reminded me of myself a decade ago, but with a fire and an ambition I never had. She was saving every penny she made, dreaming of opening her own vintage clothing boutique one day. I had no doubt she would do it. That evening, I stopped by a famous local bakery on my way home, the one with lines around the block, and bought a box of their legendary artisanal pastries to bring to my family. A small taste of the city for the people of my quiet country life. I was packing that night when Daniel came out of the shower. I packed 3 sets of clothes for you, I said, holding up a pair of his jeans. Is there anything else you need? He shook his head, droplets of water glistening in his dark hair. No, that's enough. Just so you know, my hometown is quiet and small. Don't get bored and demand to come back to the city on the first day. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Don't worry, I'm not that kind of prince. Just then, a knock on the door. It was Eleanor. She walked in, her eyes immediately finding Daniel. Her face softened, the harsh lines melting away into a look of pure adoration. I'm not entirely comfortable with this, she said, her voice a low murmur meant only for him. But I remember you used to say how much you loved the fresh air in the country. Maybe this will be good for you. Just get well soon, my son. For me, I will, Mom. She kissed his forehead, then turned to me, her face instantly hardening back into its usual mask of stern authority. I am entrusting him to you, Sophie. You are to take good care of him. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. After she left, the silence in the room was heavy. She really does love you, you know, I said quietly. Daniel's expression clouded over. There's a fine line between love and control, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And in that one sentence, I understood a universe of pain. The next morning, we took a car service out of the city. For the first hour, Daniel just sat there, staring out the window, as the skyscrapers and concrete gave way to strip malls, then suburbs, then finally, open fields and endless green. I must have been more tired than I thought, because soon my head started to nod. The steady motion of the car was a lullaby, and my eyes fluttered shut. My head lolled to the side, and just as it was about to hit the cool glass of the window, a hand gently intercepted it, Daniel's hand. He carefully guided my head until it was resting on his shoulder, and, feeling safer and more at peace than I had in months, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up when the car stopped. We were at the entrance to the small lane that led to my childhood home. We got out, Daniel paid the driver, and we walked the rest of the way, carrying our bags. As we pushed open the old, creaky gate, my mom came rushing out of the house, a huge, radiant smile on her face. "You're here! You're finally here!" she exclaimed, hugging me tightly before turning to Daniel. "Daniel, welcome. The drive wasn't too tiring, was it? Let me take your bags." "I've got it, Mom," he said, a genuine, small smile gracing his own lips. It's nice to finally be here. The warmth in my mother's house was a physical thing. It wrapped around you like a blanket. After giving us a glass of her famous iced tea, she announced, "I'm going to go out back and catch a chicken for dinner." Before I could volunteer, Daniel stood up. "Let me do it." My mother looked at him, surprised. "Oh, I didn't think a city boy would know how to do things like that." "I'm not sure I do," he admitted, "but I'd like to try." The three of us trooped out to the backyard, to the small, fenced-in chicken coop. My mom pointed to a large, proud-looking rooster. "That one there." I held the gate open for Daniel. I had a feeling this would be a disaster, so I followed him in. He squared his shoulders, his stance like a wrestler about to enter the ring. He waited for the perfect moment, then lunged. Chaos erupted. The chickens scattered, squawking and flapping, a tornado of feathers and panic. The rooster, smarter than the rest, flew straight over Daniel's head and made a break for it. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. A real, deep, belly laugh. Daniel turned to look at me, a bewildered expression on his face. "What's so funny? You run like you're chasing a bus, not a chicken." I giggled. "Oh yeah, let's see you do better." Challenge accepted. It took me a few tries, the clever bird dodging and weaving. But finally, I cornered it, grabbing it firmly by its feet. I held it up triumphantly, grinning at Daniel. "See, that's how it's done." He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his sad eyes and made them shine. He stepped closer, and his hand came up, gently plucking a small white feather from my hair. The gesture was so small, so simple, but it sent a jolt through me. I stood there, frozen for a second, just looking at him, really looking at him. That afternoon, after a long, loud, wonderful lunch with my aunts and uncles, I asked Daniel to go for a walk. We went out to the fields behind the house, the same fields where I used to play as a child. The air was clean and fresh, filled with the scent of cut grass and damp earth. "It's so peaceful here," he said, his voice soft. "When I was a kid, my friends and I used to dare each other to ride the cows," I said, smiling at the memory. He nodded, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Sounds fun. My childhood was mostly just studying. My mother always expected me to be at the top of my class. If I came in second, I was grounded for a week. My dad, he was always quiet. He left all the parenting to her. He was speaking freely, the words tumbling out in a way I'd never heard before. I knew this was my chance. I led him to a small, grassy knoll, overlooking a creek, and we sat down. Have you ever sat with someone, knowing they were on the verge of telling you the one thing, the one story, that explained everything about them? The air grows still, the world seems to hold its breath. That's how it felt. sitting there with him. "Daniel," I asked gently, "are you running from something? Are you afraid to face something from your past?" He was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the water. Then, he let out a long, shuddering sigh. "A few years ago," he began, his voice raspy with emotion, "I was in love with a girl. Her name was Laura. I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love someone." He paused, swallowing hard. "But my mother, she didn't approve. Laura's family didn't have money, and more importantly, my mother had already picked out someone else for me. Someone she deemed suitable. I refused. I told her I would only marry Laura. And so, my mother slit her wrists." The words hung in the air, horrifying and unbelievable. "She survived," he continued, his voice hollow. "They got her to the hospital in time. But after that, I gave in. I couldn't be responsible for that. So I broke up with Laura." He stopped, his throat working. I could feel the raw, suffocating grief pouring off him. "A week after I ended it, she was in a car accident." His voice broke. "She was on her way to my office. She had just found out she was pregnant." He looked up at the sky, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. "The accident, it killed them both. And after that, I shattered. The doctors had to restrain me. I wanted to die. I needed to die." He fell silent, and in that silence, I finally understood everything. The sadness in his eyes, the vacant stares, the hiding. It wasn't an illness. It was a shield, a way to escape the unbearable weight of his guilt and his mother's suffocating control. To pretend to be a broken man was easier than living as the man who had survived. I looked at this beautiful, tortured man next to me, and my heart didn't just break for him. It shattered into a million pieces, and as I sat there, I started to cry. I didn't mean to, but the tears just came. Hot, silent tears for him, for Laura, for their lost baby, for the unbearable cruelty of it all. He turned to look at me, his expression one of pure shock. "What? Why are you crying?" "Because it's so sad," I sobbed, the words catching in my throat. "Because I'm so sorry for what you lost." And then I was just weeping, ugly, gasping sobs. He seemed at a loss, completely overwhelmed. And then he did something that changed everything. He reached out and pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me. He didn't say anything. He just held me, letting me cry into his shirt until the storm inside me finally passed. We sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. "We should go back," I whispered finally, my voice hoarse. As we stood up, a wave of dizziness washed over me. Daniel's hand shot out, steadying me. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just sat for too long." He started walking ahead of me. I watched his solitary figure moving through the tall grass, and I saw not a ghost, but a man carrying an impossible burden alone. And without thinking, I ran to catch up with him. Without a word, I reached out and took his hand. I expected him to pull away, to retreat back into his fortress, but he didn't. For a split second, his fingers remained limp in mine, and then, slowly, tentatively, he squeezed my hand back. A small, almost imperceptible pressure, but it was enough. It was everything. We walked back to the house holding hands, the silence between us no longer empty, but full. It was a comfortable, breathing silence, filled with the story he had just shared and the tears I had shed for him. When we stepped into the warm glow of the kitchen, my mom was humming to herself, peeling potatoes at the sink. She looked up and saw our joined hands. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face, but she didn't say a word. That night, after I took a long shower, I came out to find the two of them sitting at the kitchen table, talking. Or rather, they had been talking. The moment they saw me, they fell silent, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "What were you two conspiring about?" I asked, trying to sound playful, towel drying my hair. "Oh, nothing," my mom said, her eyes twinkling. "Just telling Daniel all your embarrassing childhood stories." I looked at Daniel and saw the corner of his mouth twitch into a small smile. The sight sent a ridiculous, happy flutter through my chest. Later that evening, as we were all sitting in the living room watching some old movie on TV, the lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging us into darkness. "Well, fiddlesticks," my mom sighed. "Power's out again. Happens all the time out here." "I'll get the kerosene lamp," I said, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight. "I know what's even better," my mom said, a mischievous tone in her voice. "We still have that bag of potatoes from the garden. Let's build a fire." Have you ever been in a house where the power goes out, and instead of being an inconvenience, it feels like a gift, like the world outside has been silenced, and all that exists is the small, warm circle of light you're in? That's what it felt like. Daniel and I went into the kitchen. I showed him how to build a small fire in the old hearth, a task he took to with a surprising, focused intensity. We wrapped 2 potatoes in foil and nestled them into the hot coals. We sat there on the floor, side by side, the firelight dancing on our faces, casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. "Is this your first time making baked potatoes in a fireplace?" I asked, my voice soft in the quiet room. "I've been camping before," he said, his eyes fixed on the flames. "But we always used one of those chemical fire starters. Not this. This feels more real." I watched his profile in the golden light. The strong line of his jaw, the ridiculously long eyelashes, the way the fire seemed to burn away the shadows in his eyes. "What are you staring at?" he asked, not looking at me. This time, I didn't get flustered. I just smiled. "I'm staring at my ridiculously handsome husband." He turned his head then and looked at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile that made my heart do a complete, acrobatic flip. Yeah, I whispered. The potatoes were delicious. We sat around the small kitchen table with my mom, peeling away the blackened foil to reveal the fluffy, steaming white insides, slathering them with butter and salt. It was the best meal I'd had in months. Later, in the small bedroom of my childhood, the world outside our window came alive. The wind began to howl, rattling the old window panes. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. We lay in the narrow bed, a careful foot of space between us. The darkness absolute. The storm broke with a vengeance. Rain lashed against the house, and the thunder grew louder, closer. Then, a blinding flash of lightning lit up the room, followed an instant later by a deafening crash of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. I yelped, a primal, terrified sound. Without thinking, without choosing to, I scrambled across the small space between us and latched onto him, burying my face in his chest. My body was trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited for him to push me away, to stiffen, but he didn't. Instead, I felt his arms come around me, strong and sure, pulling me closer. His hand came up to stroke my hair, his fingers gently untangling the knots of my fear. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "I'm here. You're safe." And in that moment, pressed against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear, surrounded by the chaos of the storm, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just there, in his arms, and it felt like coming home. I could smell the faint scent of wood smoke on his skin, a clean, masculine scent that was just him, and I knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that what I felt for this man was no longer pity or compassion. It was something else entirely, something deeper and far more dangerous. The next day was the memorial. The house was filled with the loud, boisterous, loving energy of my extended family. Daniel, to my surprise, fit right in. He sat with my uncles, laughing at their bad jokes, dutifully accepting every glass of beer they offered him. He was charming. He was present. He was the man I was falling in love with. It was only when it was time to leave that I realized how much he'd had to drink. He was unsteady on his feet, his words slightly slurred. I had to help him back to our house, his arm slung over my shoulder. He collapsed onto the bed, a goofy grin on his face. I was smiling too, happy to see him so relaxed, so free. I went to get him a glass of water, and when I came back, his eyes were closed. He was murmuring something in his sleep. I leaned closer, a fond smile on my face, expecting to hear my name, and then he said it. A single word, whispered into the quiet afternoon. Laura. The smile froze on my face. The glass in my hand felt suddenly heavy. Laura, I miss you. I miss you so much. The air rushed out of my lungs. A cold, sharp pain pierced my chest, so intense it made me gasp. He was here, with me, but his heart, his soul, was still with her. The ghost, the woman I could never compete with. I was a placeholder, a stand-in, a warm body to keep the cold away. I placed the glass on the nightstand, my hand shaking. I backed away from the bed, from the man sleeping there, and quietly walked out of the room. That evening, after he had sobered up, we sat on the porch swing, the scene of so many pivotal conversations in my life. The silence was back, but this time it was heavy, awkward, painful. Is something wrong? He finally asked. You've been quiet all evening. I stared out at the yard, at the fireflies, just beginning their nightly dance. When you were drunk, earlier, you said her name. He flinched. I felt the movement through the swing. Sophie, it's okay, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, detached. I know you loved her. I know you'll always love her, but it still hurt. I took a deep, shaky breath. I guess I just need you to know that. This isn't just a contract for me anymore. It's not just a duty. I turned to look at him, forcing myself to meet his eyes in the gathering dusk. I think I'm falling for you. In fact, I think I already have. So when you say her name, it hurts. That's all. Having laid my heart bare, I stood up and went inside, leaving him alone with my confession and the ghost that lived between us. The next morning, when I woke up, he was already gone. My heart sank. He's run away, I thought. I scared him off. I got out of bed and went outside. And there he was. In the early morning light, he was standing in the garden with my mother, a basket in his hand, helping her pick vegetables for the morning market. He looked up and saw me, and our eyes met across the yard. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. The drive back to the city was quiet. As we pulled away, I watched my mother waving from the porch, growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared from view. Tears welled in my eyes. I felt a movement beside me. Daniel was holding out a clean, folded tissue. I took it, my fingers brushing against his. Thank you, I whispered. When we opened the door to the house in the city, Eleanor was there, waiting for us. Her eyes swept over Daniel, a look of concern on her face. Look at you, she clucked, brushing an imaginary piece of dust from his shoulder. You've gotten so dark. That country air doesn't suit you at all. Then, her gaze shifted to me, her eyes turning to chips of ice. Go and prepare dinner, she said, her voice flat and dismissive. We're back to normal now. Back to normal. The words echoed in my head as I unpacked in our silent bedroom. Normal. Was this my normal now? A life of walking on eggshells, of being an invisible servant in my own home, of loving a man who was haunted by a ghost. The brief, sun-drenched interlude in the countryside already felt like a dream, a fragile bubble that had burst the moment we stepped back over this threshold. A few days later, Eleanor announced she was going on a week-long cruise with her friends. The house breathed a collective sigh of relief in her absence. The silence was lighter, the air less charged. It was during that week that Mia, my friend from the diner, convinced me to go to the staff party. Come on, Sophie, it'll be fun, she'd pleaded. We're just getting a bunch of takeout and hanging out at the diner after we close. The boss is paying. It's not like you have to ask permission this time. She was right. For the first time, I didn't have to. So, after making dinner for Daniel, I went. It was fun. We ate pizza and wings, and someone put on music, and we all just laughed and talked and forgot about the stresses of our lives for a few hours. Mia, who was nursing a fresh heartbreak, decided that tequila was the answer. To stupid boys, she declared, sliding a shot glass in front of me. Oh, I don't really drink, I said. Just one, she insisted, for solidarity. So I did. The fiery liquid burned its way down my throat, and for a moment, it felt good. It felt like burning away the sadness. One shot turned into two, then three. I lost count. The edges of the world started to get fuzzy. The laughter around me seemed to be coming from a great distance. I was thinking about Daniel. I was thinking about him whispering Laura in his sleep, and the dull, constant ache in my chest flared into a sharp, stabbing pain. Another one, I heard myself say to Mia, my voice sounding thick and unfamiliar. My phone started ringing in my pocket. I fumbled for it, squinting at the screen. It was Daniel. Hello? I slurred. It's late. Are you coming home? His voice was calm, but I could hear an edge to it. Who is this? I giggled, feeling ridiculously clever. Why are you calling me so late? I hung up, feeling a surge of defiant, drunken power. I turned to Mia, ready for another shot, but she was crying, her face buried in her arms on the table. I just stared at her, my own head suddenly feeling too heavy for my neck. I laid it down on the cool, sticky tabletop, and the world went dark. The next thing I knew, a hand was shaking my shoulder, gently but firmly. Sophie, Sophie, wake up. I peeled my face off the table and blinked, trying to focus. It was Daniel. He was standing over me, his face etched with something I couldn't quite decipher. Worry? Annoyance? Wah. What are you doing here? You're drunk. Let's go home. Don't want to go home, I mumbled, shaking my head, which was a very bad idea. The room spun violently. He didn't argue. His voice dropped, becoming low and firm, the voice of a man who was used to being in control. It's late, Sophie. We're going home. Now. Something in his tone cut through the alcoholic haze. I nodded meekly, like a chastised child. Then, I looked up at him, my vision swimming, and held out my arms. Carry me. I fully expected him to refuse, to drag me out of there by the arm. Instead, he just sighed, a long, weary sound. He crouched down, turning his back to me. Get on. Like a child getting a piggyback ride, I wrapped my arms around his neck and my legs around his waist. He stood up effortlessly, said a quick goodbye to my bewildered coworkers, and carried me out into the cool night air. He carried me all the way home. He carried me up the stairs and into our room, gently depositing me on the bed. "I'll go make you some ginger tea," he said, turning to leave. But as he moved away, my hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. The alcohol had broken down all my walls, all my carefully constructed patience and understanding. All that was left was the raw, aching truth. "Don't go," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. "I'm not drunk. Not really. I only had a little bit." My face crumpled, and the sobs I'd been swallowing for months finally broke free. "Why?" I cried, my words a tangled mess of accusation and pain. "Why do you just stand there and watch when she's so cruel to me? Why am I the one who always has to hear the question, 'Is there any good news yet?' Why are you such a coward, hiding in this stupid act, pretending to be a fool?" The tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unstoppable. "I was so jealous," I choked out. "I was so jealous when I heard you say her name. I don't know what to do with this feeling. I don't know why I love you. I just do, and I don't know what to do. So please stop hiding. Please come back. Please be the man I know you are." I was a wreck, sobbing uncontrollably. The room was blurry through my tears. I felt a hand on my cheek, gently wiping away the moisture. His face swam into view, his eyes dark and intense. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice ragged. "Sophie, I am so sorry. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't bear another second of the distance between us." I surged forward, crashing my lips against his. It was a clumsy, desperate kiss, fueled by alcohol and heartbreak. For a second, he was still, his body rigid with surprise. I felt his hands come up to my shoulders, as if to push me away, and then something shifted. In a single, breathtaking moment, he yielded. His hands moved from my shoulders to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, pulling me closer. He kissed me back, and there was nothing clumsy or hesitant about it. It was a kiss of deep, soul-shattering hunger, of a thirst that had gone unquenched for years. The world tilted and fell away. The next thing I knew, we were on the bed, and our clothes were a tangled heap on the floor. And that night, for the first time, he wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a stranger. He was my husband, and he was finally, truly, with me. The next morning, I woke up to an empty space beside me. A wave of panic, a hangover of shame, washed over me. What have I done? I thought. I forced him. He'll hate me now. I sat up, my head pounding, and saw him. He was standing on the balcony, his back to me, staring out at the sunrise. I looked down and realized I was wearing my pajamas. I had a vague, dreamlike memory of him, after everything, gently cleaning me with a warm cloth and dressing me before he left the bed. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my body aching in a way that had nothing to do with the alcohol. I picked up my phone and texted Mia, not feeling well, going to be late. Then I took a deep breath and walked out onto the balcony. He heard me coming and turned around. His face was unreadable. "You're awake," he said. "Yeah, are you? Are you okay?" My cheeks flushed. "I'm fine," I mumbled, unable to meet his eyes. "Listen, about last night, I said a lot of stupid things. I was drunk. You can forget it." "Don't," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Don't apologize. I'm glad you said it. It's true. I've been a coward. I let you come into this marriage, and I didn't help you. I didn't try to build a family with you. That's my fault. I'm the one who's sorry." He looked away, his gaze drifting over the rooftops. "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I know everyone is always asking you if there's good news. I know how much pressure that is." He turned back to me, and his eyes were clear and steady. "So, even though I'm not fully ready to let go of the past, I want to try with you. I don't want to hide anymore, but I'm not strong enough to get out of this cage by myself. I need is less than #0. 3# is greater than I need you to give me a little more time." My own eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief, of hope. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around his waist, burying my face in his chest. "I'll wait," I whispered into his shirt. "I'll wait as long as it takes." I held him tight. This beautiful, broken man who was finally starting to find his way back. He had been playing a game of hide and seek with his own life for so long, and he was finally ready to be found. That night, after a day of quiet understanding, of shared glances that held more meaning than 1,000 words, my feet were aching. It had been a long, busy shift at the diner, a penance of sorts for my drunken escapade. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my sore arches. "Here, let me," Daniel said, his voice soft. Before I could protest, he knelt on the floor in front of me, gently taking my foot in his hands. His thumbs began to work in slow, firm circles on the sole of my foot, and the feeling was pure, unadulterated bliss. A sigh of relief escaped my lips. "Oh, that's amazing," I murmured, leaning my head back. I was feeling bold, a little higher up. On my shoulders, maybe? "They're killing me," I heard him chuckle, a low, warm sound. "Getting demanding, are we?" He moved to sit behind me on the bed, his strong hands beginning to knead the tight knots of tension in my shoulders. I closed my eyes, melting under his touch. It was in this moment of intimate, domestic peace that the door to our bedroom was thrown open. "What in God's name is going on in here?" Eleanor. She was back, a day early. Her face was a thundercloud of fury. I jumped, startled, pulling away from Daniel as if I'd been burned. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice strained. "You're home early. Clearly," she snapped, her eyes, like daggers, fixed on me. I come home to find my sick son being forced to give massages like a common servant. She ignored Daniel completely, her venom directed solely at me. "Have you no shame? Using your husband like this?" "That's not what was happening," Daniel started to say, but she cut him off. "I heard you from the hallway, a little higher up. Disgraceful. This house is still a mess from my absence. Go, downstairs, now, and clean it." Her voice was like the crack of a whip. I scrambled off the bed, humiliated, and hurried out of the room, her glare burning into my back. As I went down the stairs, I heard their muffled voices from the bedroom, a sharp, angry exchange. A few minutes later, I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing the pristine marble floor of the entryway, tears of frustration and shame blurring my vision. He had tried to stand up for me, but it was useless. In this house, her word was law. After what felt like an eternity, Daniel came downstairs. I heard him stop at the bottom of the staircase, just watching me. "She's in a rage," he said quietly. "I gathered that," I said, not looking up from the floor. "My grandmother," he continued, his voice barely a whisper, "was a very difficult woman. My mother's time as a new bride in this house. It wasn't easy. She was pregnant with me before the wedding, and my grandmother never let her forget it. She was treated badly." I stopped scrubbing and finally looked up at him. I understood what he was doing. He was trying to explain, not to excuse her cruelty, but to give it a context, to help me understand that her bitterness was a poison she had been forced to drink long ago. The hurt person, hurting others, "So you feel sorry for her?" I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "She's still my mother," he said, the words heavy with a lifetime of complicated love and pain. "I know," I said, and a strange sense of peace settled over me. "Thank you for telling me that. It helps." I finished my cleaning and went back upstairs, exhausted to my very bones. I fell into bed and was asleep almost instantly. The next few weeks were a strange dance. In front of Eleanor, we were the distant, awkward couple we had always been. But behind the closed door of our bedroom, a new world was blooming. We talked, really talked. We shared stories of our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. He told me about his work, about the complex algorithms and lines of code that used to light up his mind. I told him about the simple, quiet life I used to crave, and how it was slowly being replaced by a craving for something more. For him, but my body started to betray me. I was tired, all the time, a deep, profound fatigue that settled into my bones. I'd come home from work and just collapse into bed, sleeping until it was time to get up and do it all over again. "Are you feeling okay?" Daniel asked one night, his brow furrowed with concern. "You seem off." "I'm just tired," I said, pulling the covers up to my chin. It's been busy at the diner, but it was more than that. I was starting to feel a nagging, persistent ache in my lower abdomen. I ignored it, blaming it on stress. Then, one night, I woke up with a gasp. A sharp, searing pain shot through my belly, so intense it stole my breath. I was drenched in a cold sweat. I felt a terrifying, warm wetness between my legs. I reached out, my hand shaking, and grabbed Daniel's arm. "Daniel," I choked out, the pain making my voice thin and reedy. "Something's wrong. I'm in so much pain." The world started to tilt, the edges of my vision going gray. I heard his voice, sharp with panic, calling my name. I felt a hand on my cheek, slapping it lightly, trying to keep me conscious. But I was already slipping away, falling into a deep, dark, painless place. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the smell, that sterile, antiseptic smell that can only mean one thing: a hospital. I blinked, my eyes slowly focusing on the acoustic tile ceiling. "Sophie," I turned my head. Daniel was sitting in a chair beside the bed, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You're awake," he said, his voice thick with relief. "How do you feel? Does anything hurt?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm okay." What happened?" I looked down and saw the IV line snaking into the back of my hand. "Why am I here? Was I sick?" He took a deep breath, and the look on his face. It was a look of such profound sadness that it made my own heart ache in anticipation of what he was about to say. "You were pregnant, Sophie," he said, his voice cracking. "It was an ectopic pregnancy. The fallopian tube ruptured. You were bleeding internally, the doctor said. The doctor said if we had gotten you here even a few minutes later, they wouldn't have been able to save you." The words didn't make sense at first. They were just sounds, disconnected from reality. Pregnant, ectopic, ruptured, pregnant. I was pregnant. A baby, our baby. A tiny, secret life that had been growing inside me. A life I hadn't even known existed. And now, it was gone. My hand moved, as if of its own accord, to my flat stomach. A sound escaped my lips, a wounded animal keen. Tears, hot and silent, began to stream down my face. No, it couldn't be. The one thing his mother wanted, the one thing that could have maybe, possibly, secured my place in this family, the one thing that Daniel and I had created together in that one perfect night, was gone. The grief hit me like a physical blow, a wave of pure, black despair that threatened to pull me under. I pulled the thin hospital blanket over my head, creating a small, dark tent of sorrow, and I wailed. I cried for the baby I never knew. I cried for the future that had been stolen from us. I cried because life, in its infinite cruelty, had given me a glimpse of unimaginable happiness, only to snatch it away. Daniel didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, a silent, steady presence in my storm of grief. After a long time, when my sobs had subsided into ragged, hiccuping breaths, he gently pulled the blanket away from my face. He took my hand, his grip firm and warm. "I know it hurts," he whispered, his own eyes shining with tears. "But you're alive. You're here. That's all that matters. We'll have another chance. I promise." I was discharged from the hospital 3 days later. Eleanor, Daniel told me, had come to the hospital with him that night, but once she was told I was stable, she had simply gone home. She never came to visit, not once. She did, however, show up on the day I was leaving, not to see me, but to speak with my doctor. Daniel overheard her asking about my future fertility. Only when the doctor assured her that I could, in all likelihood, get pregnant again, did she seem satisfied. As we walked into the house, I was expecting to just go upstairs and collapse, but Daniel stopped me in the entryway. "Mom," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. "Can you sit down? I need to talk to you." The three of us sat in the living room, in the same configuration as my first day in this house. Daniel and I on the sofa, Eleanor on the armchair opposite, her face a mask of impatient curiosity. "I'm listening," she said. Daniel looked at me, then back at his mother. His gaze was unwavering. "We're moving out," he said. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's face went from confused to shocked to incandescent with rage. "What did you say?" she hissed. "Did she put you up to this?" "This has nothing to do with Sophie," Daniel said, his voice calm and steady. "This is my decision, and I'm not sick anymore, Mom. I've been better for a while now. I just didn't tell you." The color drained from her face. "What? What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm a grown man. I can get a job. I can support myself. And I can support my wife, and we need our own space." "You ungrateful boy," she shrieked, her voice trembling with fury. "After everything I've done for you, you would throw it all away for her." She glared at me, her eyes filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Mom, don't you see?" Daniel's voice was filled with a desperate, pleading sadness. "Don't you see what you do? Do you have any idea how many times I thought about killing myself? Because of the pressure, the control. I thought pretending to be a fool would be easier than being your perfect son. I married Sophie, and now you're doing the same thing to her. I won't let you hurt her. I won't let you break her. So please, just let us go." Her face contorted in a mask of rage. She snatched a heavy crystal glass from the coffee table and hurled it at him. "You insolent child," she screamed. The glass struck him on the forehead with a sickening thud. I cried out as a dark red line of blood welled up on his skin. He didn't even flinch. He just stood up, pulling me with him. "We'll be out as soon as we can," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. And then he led me upstairs, leaving his mother alone in the silent living room, surrounded by the wreckage of her broken kingdom. Upstairs, in the sanctuary of our room, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving a trembling silence in its wake. The cut on Daniel's forehead was still bleeding. "Let me clean that for you," I whispered, my voice shaky. I fetched the first aid kit from the bathroom, my hand still unsteady. As I gently dabbed his skin with an antiseptic wipe, he looked at me, his eyes dark with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "You're really okay with this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Moving out? We didn't even talk about it. It's time, he said, his voice firm. It's past time. I need to get you out of here. I need to be the man you deserve, not the boy she wants me to be. A few hours later, Daniel left to meet a friend. He said it was an old colleague from his previous job, someone he needed to talk to about getting back into the workforce. The house was eerily quiet. I was lying in bed, trying to rest, when a soft knock came at the door. It was Eleanor. Her face was pale. The fire of her earlier rage banked, replaced by a strange, unnerving calm. "May I come in?" she asked. I sat up, my heart pounding. "Daniel's not here." "I know," she said. "I came to talk to you." She walked into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. I perched nervously on the desk chair, a safe distance away. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "The cut on his forehead," she said finally, her voice low. "Is it bad?" "It's just a scratch," I answered. This idea of moving out." She continued, her eyes searching mine. "Was it really his? Be honest with me." "It was," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Can you talk him out of it?" Her voice was pleading, a sound so alien coming from her that it sent a shiver down my spine. I can't live in this house alone." Before I could answer, her phone buzzed in her hand. Her gaze dropped to the screen. I saw her expression change, her face tightening with confusion, then dawning horror. She answered the call, her hand trembling. "Hello? What did you say?" "Daniel. An accident." Her words hit me like a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis. We stared at each other for a frozen, terrible second, our earlier conflict forgotten, replaced by a shared, primal terror. And then we were running. We practically fell into a taxi, my mind a chaotic blur of panic. Eleanor was muttering to herself over and over, "No, no, no." Her cold, trembling hand found mine, and she clung to it like a drowning woman. "He can't die," she sobbed, the words torn from her throat. "My boy, my sweet boy. If anything happens to him, I'll die." I was terrified. The friend on the phone had been frantic, his words tumbling over each other. Daniel had been crossing the street. A car lost control. I squeezed Eleanor's hand back, trying to project a strength I didn't feel. "He's going to be okay, Eleanor," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "Daniel is strong. He'll be okay." We burst into the emergency room and found his friend, a man with a kind, worried face, pacing in front of the doors to the operating rooms. "How is he?" Eleanor cried, rushing toward him. "He's in surgery," the man said gently. "We just have to wait." And so we waited. We sat on the hard plastic chairs of the waiting room, a place that exists outside of normal time, where every second is an eternity, and every tick of the clock is a drumbeat of dread. I remembered the night I had been brought in, and I thought, is this how you felt, Daniel? This helpless, gut-wrenching fear. Hours crawled by. Finally, a surgeon in green scrubs came through the doors. We both shot to our feet. "How is my son?" Eleanor begged. "The patient is out of surgery and stable for now," the doctor said, his voice tired but reassuring. "He's being moved to the ICU for monitoring." The relief was so immense it made me dizzy. We both sagged against each other, muttering our thanks to the doctor, to God, to the universe. But the reprieve was short-lived. Later that night, as I stood by his bedside, watching his still, pale face, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor suddenly flatlined. A piercing, continuous alarm filled the room. Nurses and doctors rushed in, pushing me out of the way. I stood frozen, my feet rooted to the floor, as they worked on him. their voices urgent and controlled. I watched, a silent, helpless observer, as they fought to bring him back from the brink. The world narrowed to that one terrible, silent line on the screen. And then, a beep, another, a steady, miraculous rhythm. I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until it came rushing out of me in a ragged sob. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, my body shaking uncontrollably. A nurse came over and helped me up, guiding me back to the waiting room. "You should get some rest," she said kindly. But I couldn't rest. I couldn't do anything but sit there and stare at the closed door, my mind replaying that terrifying moment over and over. The next month was a living hell. Daniel remained in a coma. I spent my days and nights at the hospital, talking to him, reading to him, holding his unresponsive hand, praying for a flicker of an eyelash, a twitch of a finger, anything. Eleanor, shattered by the reality of almost losing her son, fell ill. She was consumed by a grief so profound it made her physically sick. So I cared for her too. I brought her meals, made sure she took her medicine, and then went back to the hospital to sit with Daniel. I put my job, my life, everything on hold. There was only Daniel. One afternoon, Claire came to the house. Eleanor and I were both home, taking a short break from the hospital vigil. "Sophie," Claire said, not bothering with pleasantries, "the housekeeper is taking a couple of days off this weekend. My in-laws are coming for a big family dinner. I need you to come and work for me. I'll pay you, of course, 1,000 for the 2 days." Before I could even respond, Eleanor's voice, stronger than I'd heard it in weeks, cut through the air. "No." She walked into the living room, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "She will do no such thing. Your sister-in-law is exhausted from taking care of your brother. She has no energy to be your maid." Claire scoffed. "What's so tiring? She just sits there. It's not like she's a doctor." I said no, Eleanor repeated, her voice like steel. "And another thing, Claire, your brother has been in the hospital for a month. How many times have you visited him? I was sick for days, and you never once called to check on me." "I've been busy," Claire protested, her face flushing. "Too busy for your family? I'm fine. No thanks to you. Sophie took care of me." Claire, flustered and angry, muttered something about having to leave and stormed out of the house. I looked at Eleanor, my heart swelling with a strange, unexpected emotion. Gratitude. For the first time, she had defended me. She had chosen me, her country girl daughter-in-law, over her own flesh and blood. That evening, I went back to the hospital. I sat by Daniel's bed and told him everything. "You won't believe it," I whispered, wiping his face with a warm cloth. "Your mother stood up for me today. She's changing, Daniel. She's finally realizing her mistakes." I leaned closer, my lips brushing against his ear. "So, you have to wake up. You hear me? You have to wake up and see it. I want to see you smile again. We need to welcome our beautiful children into the world. So please, please, my love, wake up." But he didn't. There was only the steady, rhythmic beeping of the machines that were keeping him alive. Night fell. I sat in the chair beside his bed, my head resting on the mattress, my hand clutching his. Exhaustion finally claimed me, and I drifted into a restless, dream-filled sleep. And in that sleep, I felt something, a faint pressure, a movement. I dreamed that something was touching my cheek, a gentle, feather-light stroke. I swatted at it, thinking it was a mosquito, and my hand connected with another hand. The touch, real and solid, jolted me awake. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at Daniel, and he was looking back at me. His eyes were open, and they were focused. They were seeing me. For a second, I thought I was still dreaming. It was too good to be true. I raised a trembling hand to rub my eyes, but then I felt it, a faint pressure on the hand that was still holding his. He was squeezing my hand. "Daniel," I breathed, the word a prayer. "Daniel, are you awake?" A slow, tired smile touched his lips. His voice, when it came, was a hoarse, rusty whisper. "You've had a hard time, haven't you?" A sob of pure, unadulterated joy escaped my lips. I threw my arms around him, burying my face in his neck, my tears soaking his hospital gown. "You're back," I cried. "Oh God, I was so scared. I thought you were gone forever." His hand came up, weakly, to stroke my hair. "Silly girl," he whispered. "I had to come back. We still have to make our babies, remember?" I pulled back, looking at him through my tears, a disbelieving laugh bubbling up inside me. "Is that really you?" I asked. "Should I call the doctor?" As I started to get up, his grip on my hand tightened, pulling me back down to sit on the edge of the bed. "Later," he rasped, and then he lifted his head from the pillow, and his lips met mine. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was gentle, tender, a promise, a confirmation. He was here. He was back. He was with me. And in that quiet, sterile hospital room, in the middle of the night, my world, which had been shrouded in darkness for so long, was finally, blindingly, filled with light. The doctor, when I finally called him in the early hours of the morning, was astounded. Daniel's recovery was, in his words, remarkable. After a series of tests, they confirmed what I already knew in my heart. He was back, truly back. The fog had lifted, the shadows had retreated. The man who looked at me from that hospital bed was the man I had fallen in love with, whole and complete. The news of his awakening sent a wave of joy through our small, fractured family. Eleanor wept with a relief so profound it seemed to wash away years of bitterness. Even Claire seemed genuinely moved, her usual brittle facade cracking to reveal a glimpse of the loving sister beneath. 3 months later, Daniel led me by the hand through a quiet, sun-dappled cemetery. We stopped in front of a simple, elegant headstone. The name etched into the marble was Laura Chen, and below it, a smiling, beautiful face looked out from a small, porcelain photograph. "This is her," he said softly. He placed the bouquet of white lilies he was carrying at the base of the stone. He lit a stick of incense, the fragrant smoke curling up into the still air. "Happy birthday, Laura," he whispered. "I wanted to introduce you to someone. This is Sophie. She's my wife." He turned his head and smiled at me, a sad but peaceful smile. "I've learned how to love her, Laura, in the same way I loved you. So, wherever you are, I hope you're happy too." I stood there, my heart full, not of jealousy or resentment, but of a deep, quiet understanding. I looked at the smiling face on the headstone and felt a strange kinship with the woman I would never know. He was no longer a man torn between two worlds. He had learned to carry his past not as a burden, but as a part of who he was, and in doing so, he had made space in his heart for me. As we walked away, his hand holding mine, I silently made a promise to the woman he had lost. "Don't worry," I told her. "I'll take care of him for the rest of my life." On the drive home, he turned to me, his eyes shining. "Let's go on a trip," he said. "A trip? Where?" "Anywhere you want. A real honeymoon. Before I go back to work, before life gets complicated again, I just want to be with you." "I've always wanted to see the ocean," I said, a thrill of excitement bubbling up inside me. "The ocean it is," he said, squeezing my hand. Our trip was everything I had ever dreamed of and more. We walked on sandy beaches, we swam in the turquoise water, we ate delicious food, and we talked for hours, filling in the spaces that had existed between us for so long. And at night, we made love, not with the desperate hunger of our first time, but with a slow, tender intimacy that was 1,000 times more profound. 2 months after we returned, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the little plastic stick, but there was no mistaking the result. 2 lines, 2 bright, beautiful pink lines. My first thought was to call Daniel. I fumbled with my phone, my fingers clumsy with excitement. I tried to type a message, but the words kept coming out jumbled. In the end, I just took a picture of the pregnancy test and sent it to him. The 3 little dots indicating he was typing appeared, then disappeared. He had seen it, but he didn't reply. A familiar, cold dread began to creep into my heart. Was he not happy? Was it too soon? I threw the phone onto the bed and went downstairs. A sudden, overwhelming craving for something sour and crunchy leading me to the kitchen. I was standing at the counter, happily munching on a slice of green mango dipped in salt, when I heard the front door slam open. A second later, Daniel burst into the kitchen, breathless, his face flushed. "Is it real?" he gasped, his eyes wide and shining. "Are you really pregnant?" I nodded, a slow, happy smile spreading across my face. "I just took the test this morning." A loud, joyous whoop erupted from his chest. He swept me up into his arms, spinning me around the kitchen. "I'm going to be a dad," he yelled. "I'm really, truly going to be a dad." He set me down on the kitchen counter, and then he did the sweetest, most ridiculous thing. He knelt on the floor, pressed his ear to my still flat stomach, and whispered, "Hello in there. It's your daddy. I love you so much already." Then he looked up at me, his face a perfect picture of pure, unadulterated joy. "I love you so much, Sophie," he said, and he kissed me. A long, sweet kiss that tasted of salt and mangoes and the start of our forever. Daniel's epilogue. When I was a boy, the world was full of noise, the sound of kids playing street hockey, of bicycle bells and laughter. But my world was quiet. It was the sound of turning pages, of a ticking clock, of my mother's voice, a constant, relentless mantra: "You will be the best. You will not fail." Failure was not an option. Love was a transaction. Life was a series of goals to be achieved, of expectations to be met. I was a high-performing machine in a world of messy, unpredictable humans. I almost broke when I was 17. I stood on the roof of a building, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, and I wanted to fly. A janitor, a man whose name I never knew, talked me down. He told me about his own daughter, lost to the silent darkness of depression. His words planted a seed of doubt in my carefully constructed world, but I was a coward. I went to the best college, got the best job, and fell in love with a woman who was wonderfully, gloriously unsuitable. Laura, she was sunshine and chaos and everything my life was not. My mother saw her as a threat, a virus in the perfect system she had built, and so she destroyed her. She destroyed us. When Laura died, I didn't just break. I ceased to exist. The man known as Daniel was gone, and in his place was a hollow shell, a ghost. Hiding inside that emptiness was easier than facing the suffocating reality of my life. It was a prison, but it was safe. I thought I would live there forever. And then there was Sophie. She walked into my quiet, gray prison, not with a key or a battering ram, but with a quiet, stubborn patience. She didn't try to fix me. She just sat with me in the dark. She looked at me and saw not a broken toy, but a lonely man. Our marriage was a business arrangement, a means to an end for our mothers. But she saw something more. She gambled her own happiness on the faint hope that there was still a man worth saving inside the shell. Slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed it happening. She brought color back into my world. Her quiet strength, her unwavering kindness, her surprising, fierce loyalty. She was the steady hand that led me out of the labyrinth of my own grief. She saw the pain I was in, and she cried for me. No one had ever cried for me before. That day, when the car hit me, my last conscious thought wasn't of my mother, or even of Laura. It was of Sophie. I knew I had to come back. I had to come back for her. She saved me. It's as simple and as complicated as that. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She loved me when I didn't believe I was worthy of love. She waited for me. And now, as I stand here with her hand in mine, feeling the tiny flutter of a new life growing inside her, I know that my life didn't end that day on the rooftop or in the wreckage of a car crash. It began the moment a quiet girl from the country with sad, hopeful eyes walked into my life and refused to leave. She is my wife. She is the mother of my child. She is my home.